right, let me get started then. Just a reminder, please double click on the video if you want to see the slides larger. You can double click on that and I become a little talking head. Okay, great. I already just mentioned this in the chat, but I did just update the link for the slides here. I've tweeted this as well, but at tinyurl.com, DrupalCon squiggles. And yeah, hi, this is my face. I'm Marissa Epstein, and I'm really happy to be here. I want to say thank you to DrupalCon for having me, and in this specific time and finding a solution so we could present and connect during this week. And I appreciate you for being here and listening. So as I said earlier, feel free to weigh in on the chat. I'd love to hear your voices since I can't see your faces today. So I'm Marissa Epstein. You can call me Mars. So Mars Epstein on Drupal, Mars Toyship on Twitter. And I am a senior user experience designer at Lullabot. So generally known at the DrupalCons, but we are a web strategy, design, development, and support community, company, that's fully distributed. So I've been there for about 5 years doing UX for some large-scale Drupal sites, Georgia.gov, recently Georgia Public Broadcasting, Pantheon, and the Grammys. So that's all I'm going to talk about us. I'm really here to talk about sketching. So I want to share ideas. This was my initial title. I've had sketching in UX, but the point that is a little too long for some of the list components is that I want to sketch to make decisions and just get on with it in a process. So I know that sketching can be simple as a concept, but I wanted to get deeper today into a couple things that I've learned after about a decade of sketching. Yeah. So I had a lot of fun building this talk and going through a shelf of sketchbooks that I still had. So I did have to throw in just a couple highlights to get rolling here. These are from college, so doing icon design, obviously dinosaurs, octopi, and some rocket ships for a branding project. When I was an art director, just getting into web, you can see starting with wireframes, but really more high level, a lot of branding, and some interaction states in there. A more recent fun example was for a hackathon called Ludum Dare, where you make a game in a weekend. And I did want to throw in one more general point here, because my experience, at least personally, lately has been that there's a lot of unexpected, unusual stuff going on right now, and it's forcing us to adapt really quickly. So it's even more important. It's not a hackathon, but it's really important to keep track of all the things and all the plates and to be able to do it with less effort in case you aren't running on a full tank. So like I started this talk because people said, how do you keep your sketches so clean or this or that? And then I've also had, please, I hope you don't mind me going a little personal here, but I've had people in my personal life just sort of ask me how I keep my S word together, my stuff is together. And so the reason, or the way that I do that, besides keeping my stuff together with an obscene amount of Animal Crossing, is stuff like this, is that my dining table is always full of lists, often on the back of bills. I have calendars that remind me of things, but I need some sort of visual layout and symbol system to help myself understand what fires that I need to put out today in my own 2020 dumpster. And so back to my sketchbooks and away from what the back of my mail looks like. You can see the topic is different now for UX and content strategy projects. This was a large set of government sites on Drupal. And of course, sketching is still a big part of that. So I'm going to touch back to this case study later on, but during this, some coworkers did have some questions, like the ones I just mentioned, of just some of my process, and also shared some really insightful observations with me that prompted this talk. So thanks to them. So tonight, I want to look at why, when, and how I integrate sketching into our process. Say tonight in Providence, Rhode Island, but of course, good morning, good evening, and good night, so to speak. So if you want the TLDR for today and want to switch over to something else, I think really the point is that in all of these examples that I'm giving that are varied and bizarre, that I really have to sketch because I just haven't found a better way to communicate and to save things. So it's a really great way for me to quickly note an idea for me, but it's also a really quick way to communicate it with others and get feedback and stuff like that. So I know that's not for everybody, but that's sort of why I'm here. My agenda, I want to cover why I think sketching rocks and why I think you should too. I'll try to keep my pitch short. What sketching is for and the different ways that I sketch, so you can consider which ones work for yourself, and then go over a couple pro tips beyond the pen pencil stuff, including what to do remotely, which is something that Lullabot has been thinking about for a long time, but I think is a little more top of mind now. And as I mentioned, sort of a case study example. Okay, so at this point, my notes say, hand out paper. Joke's on me. So please, if you feel so inclined and you have a little mental space, I would encourage you to enjoy this moment where you can be at your desk and doodle too. If you have a little notebook or piece of paper, I would love to see any sketches afterwards. I saw a really fantastic sketch note recently that has been, one of the more rewarding parts of this talk for me. So yeah, exactly. I have paper in my printer and a big stack right here for workshops from the before times. So yeah, I'd love to see this in Slack or in Twitter or what have you. So thanks for that. Okay, why I love sketching. I think that dollars and cents, this is a process that offers a real return on investment for your design projects because it's super fast, it's a very light thing to do, and so it's cheap, which is nice, it's agile. So I think that is usually a nice sell, that it's not a really big process and you can sort of work that in when you need. There isn't a really big learning curve or training required. It's just that you can sort of sketch at your level. So of course, this is really relevant for visual or UX sort of focused folks, but I think it's relevant to a lot of other roles if you're in content or product ownership or project management, or even developers have said they wanted to visualize something complex. And so if you're trying to explain something that might benefit from mapping, I think you can apply this to a lot of things. It also doesn't really require expensive tools, which is nice. So I know if you ask some folks, they have the marker, and that's the one. And I think that's amazing. We joke around don't talk about whiteboards because then we'll start. But it honestly doesn't matter. And I think that the best tool is the one that you have. And so honestly, at one of the, as I said before, times on sites, I had some ideas I remember I wanted to work on that we had discussed at a workshop and prepare some things for the next day. So honestly, I went down to the hotel lobby and I took a big sack out of the printer of paper, and and then I used the pen that they gave me in my hotel room, and that was enough. The client wasn't asking me about the tools or the training. It was enough. It's also fast to understand beyond fast to make. So I have definitely been guilty of writing these 70-page briefs, and I know that not everybody's going to read that. Maybe I make a bulleted list at the beginning and I hope people read that. but it really is easy to grok a visual flow of something, and it's just less mental energy for the other person to, you know, get that communicated across. I love that it's really iterative. You can quickly make new versions. You can modify something. I've seen people literally tear them apart and put them together. I fold stuff and it's gross, and it doesn't matter. It's okay, and I encourage you to make something really messy, and because it's more easily modifiable. So eventually you're going to get there and you need it to look nice, but this is a time that that's okay. And one point that I want to raise there is, especially as a designer doing, you know, beautiful comps, sometimes of a website, it can be really hard to throw something out that didn't work in testing. So I like that sketching sort of sets up that expectation to kill your darlings and sketch 4 of something and only use 1. So you're inherently going to throw out 3. You know, it's just easier to find, I think, a better solution. Okay. So I'm going to assume that you're all sold. And now I'll go into sort of beginning to end through a project, the examples of how it fits into my process. Discovery. So this is a big section of Lullabot. I love the on-sites that we do, often as part of planning work for upcoming projects or strategy sort of consultations. These can take on a lot of different, that's great, a lot of different sorts of forms and variations of groups and sketching and activities, but they usually really fall under the theme or the thread that we're just trying to understand a problem. We want group consensus, we want everybody to agree, we want to write an SOW that makes sense to everybody if we are planning something really major. And so I had written, we try to solve the problem, but first we just need to understand that. And comes back again to clarifying assumptions to reduce risk and really help with project planning. It's a bit of a mess, but I wanted to make this point somewhere, somehow. And so I wanted to show that, especially in discovery, when a client is just telling us all the stuff, sketching is really huge to just take a note, to just sketch a concept, maybe a thumbnail or something I have to follow up on, but just somehow digest all of that information that we're getting, or things that are coming up. So this is just some notes of mine from like a 20-person demo a couple of weeks ago. And so I guess, you know, the way time is passing now, you can see, oh, like June 29th. When even was June? You know, it's really nice to have these notes and just use them, not as this visual thing, but just as a quick shorthand for me to remember what we were talking about when I pick this up again. But more specifically on this slide, I was going to show that I'm developing my own shorthand, and everybody should think about what serves them, because I know that a queue requires client follow-up, or a star means something, or arrows, or sort of a decision flow. So I hope that you know, there's lots of guides out there and great resources for that sort of thing if you want a starter, but it's interesting to think about what you want to clarify. Okay, lots of ideas, lots of ways to generate sketches and work through ideas with sketching. So I'm going to just scope this right now to the familiar topic of generating wireframes. So let's say the Lullabot team, the design team, is going to do a remote sketch session to build out some wires. The way that most of our wires start is actually these sorts of paper docs that we call presentation models. So I'm going to try not to go like stuck into the whole research here, but we have some key audiences, key user tasks, which are balanced against the business needs. We have sort of different pages or components built out this way, and tons of research that we've gathered previously. So again, sketching is often about putting ourselves in front of this sort of fire hose of information and then quickly being able to transcribe that visually. So then we're looking at this information and knowing that we need visuals for the hierarchy or the flow of content, or how that layout really appears when we sketch. This fake workshop is half a day, so it looks like a lot of time together, but I did want to make the point that we aren't like on the phone the whole time. So if we're hopping on to Google Meet or Zoom, what have you, we will go through our presentation models, squiggles for the day, as you can see, sort of a briefing, and then go off to sketch. So sort of put ourselves on mute, go away, and have our private time to just sort of focus. I also wanted to point out that it's short. You know, we start with 15 minutes, and as the team gets better, it's often 10. Just real quick, real focused, come back, and then take some time to review together. I also wanted to recommend that you take some time for a second sketch session after that review period, even if it's 5 minutes, or if you do 2 sketch sessions and then sort of a, you know, revise of A and B to what have you. But I think that you have a very amazing opportunity when you hear the feedback of your team and your coworkers, and you can jot down ideas or see what they've done and really iterate from there. And having to stop and move on really misses a lot of opportunity, as I'm saying. So definitely take a little more time and record those things before you go on. Specifically going through that process, this is kind of what my notes look like at first. I got the question, you know, how your sketch is so clean, and I chuckle because this is what they look like at first. And so a lot of thumbnails that are very close between the bulleted lists and the actual comps I'm trying to create, thumbnails. Then I'm iterating and trying to clean that up and show the team something that looks like a page, and it doesn't originally have all those notes on it. But as we're walking through it in that review phase, we are coming up with a lot of ideas or making decisions. And then finally, that has this longer page, which you can see sort of cut with the squiggles, that has a little more detail and those questions answered. Finally, if we want to take this wireframe from the sketch session digitally, I mean, you can go as far as you want. I'll talk a little bit more about this in the tools section, but I guess for process reasons, it's great to do this if you want to keep iterating without drawing a new sketch. And you can, again, get very messy with this of cutting something up in Photoshop or just duping a bunch of things in the list and calling it a day and flattening it. You know, I've done it, and it looks fine because it communicates what you need. But there are fancier tools if you really want to get into like building vector wireframes. But yeah, I'll go back to that in my shiny object section later on. Okay. So as far as the people in politics side, this was a really interesting discovery for me. So I had noted that I will primarily sketch so far to take notes for myself and to start working on a design concept. But it really was a fairly internal or personal experience. It was to help me complete my work or to work very closely with designers doing the same work. But I found lately that there's an amazing amount of collaboration that can come from sharing visuals from meetings or notes or workshops in different activities you might be participating in. You know, there's a lot of ways to do this. So I just wanted to show some examples of how it can help more than one person. These are some sketches from actually my father, who's an architect, because he doesn't relate to a lot of the web work that we do, but there are certain things that do overlap. And one of them is like this phrase, "I'll know it when I see it," which is sort of this issue of chasing a client's moving target of what success might look like. So there's a lot of different ways to define that, but what I really like that he does is he has potential clients out for lunch if he wants to do an architecture project, remodel a new house, and just hears them out. And a lot of times they'll say, okay, I figured out what my project is, but then it's kind of crazy. So it's like a futuristic vintage, like boho tiny car. What is that? And so, you know, he might not have the shared vocabulary of the industry, right? And so my father gets out a legal pad and starts sketching at lunch, and you know, the client is loving it because he thinks he's getting all this value over like chips, and then My dad loves it because he's deciding if he wants to go in on this with this client, make this commitment, and really skip over that so that now they have a shared vocabulary and they can point and do this sort of this, not that, and really narrow down their direction together. So you can kind of avoid those surprises and those moving targets. I love how collaborative it can be when everybody sketches. It's a really helpful way for others to communicate things they might not think to. So when you can, I think having stakeholders and developers and everybody in between participate. And I have heard a couple clients say this is like an engaging activity that seems to be really beneficial for the workshop. So yeah, I think that's great as well. But my favorite is really more that having development involved early and showing their sorts of implementation or experience recommendations. It can curb a lot of those really large overhead or not performant ideas that we might sort of fall in love with early on. Like I joke that I'd really rather have my bubble popped and have it popped early. To that point, these were some examples of sketches that actually were from a Lullabot product. And so there is a sort of a developer, a backend developer for one of these and a business stakeholder for the other. And they did end up influencing that final product. A compromise sketching together is breaking out into small groups. When possible, put a Jeff Eaton at each group. But we do try to have someone that is more comfortable or internally to the team. But it helps you combine different perspectives like we're talking about here. Also, if you're strapped for time, doing these small groups can let you divide and conquer across multiple tasks and pages. I did want to make the point, though, that this is not always the situation, and you can collaborate with sketching even if you're the only one sketching. So sometimes, maybe you're just herding a lot of cats at that workshop, or people are uncomfortable with sketching in particular, or maybe just like the website process in general. So if I can, we're in person at a workshop, I would like to stand up at a whiteboard or a sticky pad and ask confirming, clarifying questions, and then just visualize what I'm hearing. So we're trying to describe that as being the marker for the group is still helpful for ways to use sketching to visualize what they're saying without forcing a marker into their hand. I just had a question about an application that I'm recommending, and I'm curious if there's something that you mean in particular. What I had been referencing previously was Figma, and I'm using a Remarkable tablet for some of these sketches. So that will come in, but honestly, a lot of what I am talking about is, yes, thank you, the Sharpie, a Post-it, and I do have a tool section that I'll get into, but it really is, what's at your desk and what is your client comfortable with. Yeah, so that was actually perfect. Going into documenting, this is a way that I have been starting to sketch a little more, and it's very different than this sort of in-process artifact that I was using and then throwing away, but we're almost using it like an initial round of deliverables. This is again about communication, but at a later phase of design. I believe that Dan Mall said this better than I did or will, but when we do these static Photoshop comps of websites, in his example, we're not actually making websites, we're just making pretty pictures of websites. So, switch over to a mindset of communicating or really documentation to document how to build that website. I think we can really focus on what is important without wasting a lot of time on the presentation of the design. So as obvious as it sounds, ask yourself, where is clarity needed? What do you specifically need to recommend? And what are you adding to your comps that is just distracting to stakeholders? So again, keeping it messy can be good. It can also encourage stakeholders to provide more honest feedback because it doesn't look so nice. And like I say, the content might be less distracting. Oh, excuse me. I like to start as far as my fidelity with something like this. You can see that the image on the left is just a box with an X in it. I used to draw what the image was, and then we would have discussions about, if that should be that exact race that we want to show that runner from, and those kinds of details that can take away from sort of the wireframe goals. You can see there as well, heading 1 goes here like this. I don't want it to be too distracting or to talk too much about copy that can be edited in a CMS later. I'd rather tie it back to a style guide or a hierarchy of information. So I can see maybe instead of heading 1, it says compelling actionable case study title goes here. That sorts of things that are helpful, I think, is great. But if you try to label that case study, you might get a little stuck. Also, you can see sort of my squiggly metadata, links for boxes and things like that. Yeah, I think if you go through that question each time, you can sort of hit that sweet spot each time. Now, to relate this to your style guide, something that I struggle with is maybe leaving a mistake in a comp where there's some extra padding, and now someone has a question of if that's new, and we need to build that in. And so I think that using a sketch that's vague and giving yourself a little wiggle room is good, because you can be leveraging your component library and referencing your existing patterns. So just to that point, I've made that mistake of, is this a regular button because there was just a little extra space? No, I want to literally write here, this is just the primary button that is referencing an existing system. So a huge disclaimer here, with all this knowledge sharing, yeah, these sketches are great. I am an advocate, but wireframe sketches don't give us the full picture, because we need to create a finalized pattern library out of these to really make our components final, so that we have something that we're referencing, that we know what's going into these sketches. So we need to show our design aesthetic and type systems and color and very specific UI within a style guide, so that can not force us to assemble everything together every single time. And then really the developers are the ones that are bringing this to life. So that's the magic section. There was a session yesterday called Big Systems, Big Problems that I think dug into this really nicely. It was Kate and Carl. So look at their recording if you didn't get a chance to see that live. So another point I want to make here is just that I want us to get away from the expectation of creating these full page comps for every single thing. I think there's a lot of simplification that we can offer here, and sketching is one of the tools to do that. So this is not a new argument that it can be a little difficult to have sketch and comp pixel perfect versions of a page at every size, at every iteration of different interactions that have various states, and show all of that, and then make one change and have to ripple that through all of those. But then we get into these sort of complicated variables with the opportunities that Drupal affords. Now, when you are building a landing page for a client, and you want to explain that it's going to be done with Layout Builder with a really robust set of components, what should you do? You have the option of comping every single version of this blog post out with its extra guacamole, as I've described it here, or what I would do is push towards a sketch of 2-page layouts like this with a bunch of arrows in it, so that it's a lot easier to just agree on that concept and go off and then build the thing, instead of having to make all of those first and then build the thing, because I think even if it is possible, it's just not as effective. Now, just to relate this a little further to Drupal, it's another reason we don't want to be hyper prescriptive with our comps, the same way that I had said, I just want a button here. I have definitely experienced that before, where our team has designed, a beautiful piece of UI, maybe in a calendar picker or a schedule, something like that. And then this component ends up getting shelved as far as the front end, because we find something out of the box that is great. It doesn't need those specs because it is a totally different implementation that followed this robust UI phase, where we could have had a lean sketch with a box that says the calendar goes here, and then found what we were going to do at that point later on. I hope everybody saved up some money for this talk, because it sounds like we're getting quite a bit of products ready. I'm really excited about that, and you guys are very ready for the tools section. So I have been very excited, focused on and excited about my role as a designer, but I do want to talk about how these artifacts were leveraged by other people. So you can know kind of what to expect when the pieces fit together. So all these lean wireframes I'm showing allowed us to create this sort of design systems checklist, which was one of many spreadsheets that we made. So this was great, because in this project, for example, we were able to, I was working with a support designer doing UI, sort of running with things that I had started the UX for in tandem. So this allowed us to track the work, what was highest priority, what was still remaining to do, and really assist with project management for design and just allocating stuff within ourselves. It helped with getting approvals to see what was ready and needed client review and all of that. Here we have some content annotations. So again, I love this because it's ugly, but it also does work. So what the content strategist and I were doing were essentially working on a data dictionary and like content modeling at the same time as page building and working on wireframes. So we were able to validate them and test against each other. So here he is annotating against the content model and seeing how we might want to make some edits or what needs to be automated, and then adding those details to a particular field, those kinds of things, which was great to just make sure we were on the right page before we got too far. And I love a spreadsheet, but I do think that sometimes these like ugly things can speak a little louder. And finally, these annotations served us for backend development, so as well as content strategy. So you can see like we're just marking all over these with numbers. I think it's okay that they're a mess. You can get really fancy if you want with Figma, or InVision is great because they have comment features, and you can color code them that this is a dev note and this is urgent and stuff. But the point still works here. I love this one because if you can't read it, the comment just says, I don't know what this is. And so we were able to go through the rest of it and say, I understand how this works, and then just prompt a conversation while reviewing the rest of the documentation. And we figured out what goes in that sidebar and how it's populated. Okay, we made it. I can't wait to hear all about the Rocketbook. So as I said, you really can use anything. I do think experimentation is great as far as tools for sketching, because you just find what's more comfortable for you. Sometimes I really like forcing myself to use a big chunky marker to help you, move really fast. But maybe sometimes you just have to have an eraser. And so actually, this is going to be a blast because I'm stuck at my desk. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of my tools. I'm really sad. I just had a Vincent van Gogh ear eraser that I cannot get my hands back on. It's in my pile of dust somewhere. So there's a couple things like that are just fantastic. But I'm going to show you a couple. So let's see. The most basic thing is just, I said the thing you have with you is the best. And so I really like these little, so I'm like the sponsor. Field notes are an Aaron Draplin product, but they're just like really tiny little books that fit in a pocket if you have pockets. And then they're dot grid as well, which I know we've been talking about. Yeah, those are nice. If you don't want to go full on digital. I also like to use dot grid or some sort of grid when I sketch. You can get really fancy about the templates that you use. So we have a couple that we use for responsive design that include grid widths and that kind of thing. Sketch Eyes is a good one for that, that has just things you can print out. Notice also that there's a name of the project and a date. I would also put your name and maybe what page you're working on or what concept the sketch session was in, because we often lose track of those things. Space pens are awesome. I just had to shout out to that. I love that, except they roll off the table. The JotNot app is very cool. We struggle a lot with the problem of the on-site together, somebody goes home with that manila folder, or we have a remote review like I described, and now we're losing it because the call is ending and we didn't actually get a file unless you took a screenshot of this screen share or something. So JotNot is a couple bucks. I think it's gonna be 4 or 5 USD. But when you take a photo, it allows you to skew to the corner of the page so it is correctly proportioned, and then really ups the contrast. So it kind of looks like a nice scan. And then, of course, you just have to put it into like a Google folder or something. I really love dry erase boards. I'm not just gonna like pick one up right now yet, but I like these because they sort of force everybody to stand around them and like make a decision and then leave. You sort of expect that you have to erase it when you're done, and it's okay to sort of iterate on top of each other and reference it as well. Another thing that is nice in a similar way are these giant pads of like sticky pages, like just like giant Post-its. And so, of course, like Post-its on Post-its, like it's very like MTV TV show. But I really like these if you put them up on the wall and just sort of keep going throughout the, maybe a workshop of a couple of days, and you can really quickly reference what you were discussing or what your persona activity resulted in when you're making this tone decision, for example. Okay, so I actually do have a whiteboard that I'm just going to pick up. So one of my coworkers did this very cool thing, and it's bizarrely simple. He laminated paper. So this is Jeff Eaton laminated these 11 by 17 pieces of paper, and dry erase markers work on them. And it's really fantastic to like hand them out. They sort of fit in your suitcase backpack. You can wipe them off, but you take a picture first of each side. It's really handy. So I really do recommend that. And then I have these little markers. And yes, I absolutely love this idea that you could laminate anything. So you can combine that with your doc grid, or you can combine that with a blank image of your website with a header in it, or whatever you want to get creative with. So I often get this question of how I keep my sketches so clean and straight, and I always kind of laugh because I use like a straight thing. So I don't even mean a ruler. So let me just find here in my little bag of tricks. So this is just like a nameplate that I had a long time ago. And I put these little dots on this. And so literally this is often my ruler. It's just like something from recycling you should be throwing away. So I'm going to put this right up to my camera and see if I can show you. I have some marks on the edges here that look like nothing, but these are actually the widths that I use for wireframe pages and the content grid within the wireframe. So if I have to sketch a really long page across multiple pages of my sketchbook or something, I know that they're going to line up when I like Frankenstein them together later. That is a thing. And yes, I literally have been using a Christmas card from Lullaby for years as a ruler because it's just always here. Oh, since I don't always have a live demo at my desk. Okay, so the final one that I really like, and I do want to say they're not sponsoring the talk, is this remarkable tablet. And so I'm going to show you what that looks like. It's a fairly light, small, like e-reader tablet. There's a picture of a cat in it. And so I can have like notebooks and folders and different things. I did use it to complete this talk, and it does have a couple really interesting features of being able to lasso something and move it or duplicate it. You can email yourself. You can have mediocre transcript, like handwriting to text. But the best thing about it is that it allows you to send yourself SVGs and sort of sync them. So you can sort of quick view it as a PDF sort of thing, or you can send yourself vector files of all of these sketches. So that is how I'm getting into these fancy Figma files. And so I will say again, they didn't sponsor this. I would love that. But there is the Remarkable 2, I believe, coming out later this year. Of course, it's been a little delayed. Okay, so I had touched on this before, but I did just want to repeat in the tools section. I do think it's really important for you to use whatever UI program or design program that you're already using that you'd like to use. Familiarity is important. Figma is cool. InVision does a lot of the same things. There's a lot of different programs. I've been using Axure, and it offers a lot of the same features, and I was really pleased with that. So, whatever you use, great. But yeah, it can be, a hacky Photoshop, or it can be something vector like this, just a starting point for the design down the road. As far as specifically remote tools, this is going to sound like a sort of kicking the can, but just use what you actually use already. So there's a lot of artifacts that we use to make these happen. Long video calls are important, so whatever your screen share of choice is. We prep notes in advance, as you saw, and then we take more live. So whatever your document of choice is, we like paper. We're trying a lot of different video tools. And then, make sure that you have a folder of somehow to share these. So Google Drive, Dropbox is pretty common for us. Sometimes it's just a photo album of the day. And I did want to just say Slack again, because we really like sharing in there as sort of a timeline. So let's say we have a 3-day workshop and not everyone can attend. It's easy to keep up in Slack, or I want to refer back to it later, or I want to start a thread on something. I've been surprised that is less of a mess than I thought it would be. So I just saw really quickly a question fly by. Can you ever see yourself going 100% digital with your sketching and wireframing? Possibly. I mean, that's pretty close to what we're doing, but not all the time. It just depends. I have been liking the Remarkable tablet. It's pretty close, but sometimes I'm just going to draw on a napkin, I suppose. I hope that helps. Another tool I did want to share, I was disappointed to find, my specific one is actually discontinued, but I am using an IPEVO camera, and so what it allows you to do is place a document here, and then or a notebook, and sort of gesture and tilt and focus and take photos that way as well. So you can do a live presentation, or you can sort of use it in place of a scanner. So mine was about $80, and it looks like now you can really choose how luxurious you want your document camera experience to be. But it is really nice to just poke a pencil in and be able to write down a suggestion or a thumbnail of what someone's telling you in real time and have that feedback. Okay, so really quickly, I know I'm almost at my time here. I wanted to show a quick case study. Georgia Gov, we did a lot of sketches just taking notes as wireframes. And I did some just trying to keep up in a conversation. I thought I couldn't. And then I found that actually sharing them with others was helpful. In the previous example, it gave us the work for the wires. And in this one, it helped me validate something and got people talking. And finally, we got to actually do page building with some content editors using sketches and these little whiteboard sheets. So it allowed us to show them page building and validate the components that we were designing. So you can just see how, them sketching, us sketching, taking notes, working collaboratively. There's a couple different variations of how these fit together. Yeah, so that's my spiel. Sorry to go over just a little bit. I did want to note that this is really personal, so please take in and leave and just pepper in what you see as maybe having value. And of course, make sure that this is seamless with your team and with your clients. You know, you want to set expectations so that everybody is not expecting the perfect comp. And of course, I really scoped this to wire, so I'm going to throw in one more example here. This is why I can't go just digital, because I just drew this on the back of some stamps last year. But it doesn't matter that it's messy because this wasn't the deliverable. My deliverable was this Halloween costume for my dog to become the coffee cup from Game of Thrones. So, you know, it was okay that I drew something really messy while I'm on YouTube because it allowed me to deliver what I needed. So yeah, my point being, keep your eyes peeled for weird places that sketching fits into your life. Yeah, so I don't know if anyone can stay for questions. Hopefully I don't get booted yet, but thanks. And I also want to add, don't forget, please, the DrupalCon evaluations. I would love feedback. And I would love any sketches. If anybody did a thing, please share a thing. Thanks again. Have a great night. Do we have time for questions? Let's see. Oh, there's so much to scroll through. I'm so excited. I see some people having some concerns about sketching, and I want to encourage you to make a mess and aim for ugly, because then you're not disappointed. Yeah, recommending Figma, for example. I am recommending pen and paper. I'm loving seeing some of the apps that others are working on, like Concepts, GoodNotes. I do really like the 1917 notebook that someone called out. A little expensive, but it's gorgeous. Any other questions? Let's see. How is Jotnut better than Google Drive app native scan function? Honestly, I'm not sure. That might be better. I think it just came out at a time where it was not better. So if that works for you, I think that's great. I'd like to take a look at that because it's been a minute. I didn't love the SKU, I think, at the time, but it's certainly been a minute. Let's see. Dry erase markers on mirrors is great. I also have seen people use them in offices full of glass. Laminating a template or a drop grid, using dry erase markers in a fridge. All some great comments in the chat. I just want to know something I really liked seeing in the chat is that drawing on paper can help with object permanence as well. So that does make a lot of sense that can be easier for someone. And so having that flexibility in their tools versus digital drawing, I think is a good consideration. I did draw as a kid, but actually not a lot. A lot of my friends in my graphics programs actually were way more illustrators. I was more of like a colorer. Is that a thing? I really liked redrawing Pokemon. That was a big task, apparently. Thank you, everyone, for sharing all of these tools. I know there's a lot of tools. Usability testing remotely of a lot of things. I would say a lot of what we like to do is really just like a moderated hangout where we can keep it as scrappy as we need to. We can use tree tests and those sorts of things that are just showing off a sketch in Figma preview. You know, Figma does give a really good sort of share link and interactive prototyping option, so that's great. We've definitely been playing around with different video tools and recording tools. And so I'm still trying to nail down what I would recommend for you. I know that GoToMeeting and InVision was a pretty successful combination with us for a while as well. There's a lot of other tools. I would also even just say, I think that Otter.io is a helpful one, even though it's not directly for usability testing, but for transcripts while testing. Yeah. Any other questions I might have missed? I think I have finally. Oh, how would you use sketching in a real-time remote communication? Okay, if there are any other questions that I haven't answered, please repost them because I missed it. Yeah, so as far as sketching real-time remotely, that is great. I mean, I do that a lot. So one of the things I like about the Remarkable is that the notebooks sync pretty quickly. So I can screen share my Remarkable app and then pop out of the notebook while I'm working on it and then share that screen, or drop a screenshot into a Slack. I do that a lot. I make something very ugly and I drop it into the Slack as a screenshot. So I think that can work. I know it's a little asynchronous, but even just being on a call with somebody and they're walking through something, being able to very quickly snap a picture on your phone or have something that uploads digitally and then Slack them and say, is this what you're talking about? And be able to, keep it as real time as possible is great. A lot of times after these big product planning calls, I'll try to clean up my notes and share them out immediately after, just to say, are we all leaving on the same page? So I think it's really about just using the real-time remote communication tools that you already use more. Yeah, sometimes I just sketch something in a notebook, take a photo with my phone, and upload it into Slack. I do this a lot. I have held things up to a camera during a Zoom meeting, but I find that everybody's mileage varies, and they might see a lot of pixels, or they might see like 1 inch off from my notebook and not see any of the sketch that I'm trying to hold up. So I've given up doing that personally. The IPvo cam does really help for that, but I know that not everybody has that opportunity. Any other questions? All right, thank you so much for attending, and hope you have a great rest of your GlobalCon and stay safe.